Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Meridian and watched the stars through the main screen. The ship had been traveling for 3 weeks toward the Kepler 442 system after receiving strange reports from deep space monitoring stations. The energy readings made no sense according to current human science. Dr. Amy Brooks walked onto the bridge carrying a data pad filled with numbers that kept changing. She was the ship's lead scientist and had been studying the signals since they left Earth space. Her face showed worry mixed with excitement. "Captain, we need to talk," she said quietly. "The signals are not natural, and they are not from any human technology we know about." Morrison turned to face her. He had worked with Brooks for 5 years and trusted her judgment completely. When she looked worried, it usually meant everyone else should be worried too. "Show me what you found," he said. Brooks activated the main display and streams of data filled the screen. The patterns looked like communication signals, but they were too complex for human technology to create. More importantly, they seemed to be talking about humans. "We managed to break part of the code," Brooks explained. "These signals mention Earth and human colonies by name. Someone has been watching us for a very long time." Lieutenant Commander Paul Rivers moved closer to look at the data. He was the ship's tactical officer, and his job was to think about threats before they became problems. The idea that unknown aliens had been studying humans without contact made him very uncomfortable. "How long have they been watching?" Rivers asked. "Based on the signal references, we can understand at least 40 years, Brooks replied. "Maybe longer, but our translation software is still learning their language patterns." Morrison felt a cold sensation in his stomach. 40 years of secret observation meant these aliens knew everything about human technology, military capabilities, and probably human psychology too. This was either very good news or very bad news. "Are there multiple species involved?" Morrison asked. Brooks nodded and switched to a different data display. "We have identified at least 3 different signal types. The computer thinks they represent 3 separate alien civilizations. We are calling them Alpha, Beta, and Gamma groups until we learn their real names." Rivers studied the tactical implications while Brooks continued her explanation. 3 unknown alien species working together to study humans suggested either scientific cooperation or military planning. Given human history, military planning seemed more likely. "What are they saying about us?" Morrison asked. "That is where it gets strange," Brooks said. "They are not talking about our technology or our military strength. They keep discussing human decision-making during crisis situations. Specifically, they seem very interested in how humans calculate acceptable losses during warfare." The bridge fell silent as everyone processed this information. Morrison had participated in enough military actions to understand what Brooks meant. Humans had a unique ability to make harsh mathematical decisions about who lived and who died based on saving the most lives possible. "They find our logic disturbing," Brooks continued. "The translated fragment suggests they cannot understand how humans can show compassion and love while also making calculated decisions about sacrifice and death." Rivers pulled up historical data on his console. "They probably studied our conflicts in detail. The atomic bombs in World War II, the trolley problem discussions in philosophy. Every time humans chose to sacrifice few to save many, but that makes us practical, not evil," Morrison said. "Every species faces those choices eventually. According to these signals, other species do not face those choices the way we do," Brooks replied. "The Alpha Group messages suggest most galactic civilizations either make decisions based purely on emotion or purely on logic, but never both together, like humans do." Morrison walked to the window and looked out at the stars somewhere out there. 3 alien civilizations were having long discussions about whether humans were too dangerous to allow into galactic society. The irony was not lost on him that they were probably making their own calculated decisions about human survival. "Is there more?" he asked. "Yes," Brooks said quietly. "The most recent signals suggest they are planning some kind of intervention. The computer translation is incomplete, but words like tribunal test and containment keep appearing in the messages." Rivers immediately began running threat assessments on his console. If three alien civilizations decided humans were too dangerous, the results would be catastrophic. Earth and all human colonies could be destroyed or imprisoned within their current space forever. How much time do we have? Morrison asked. Unknown, Brooks replied. But the signal traffic has increased dramatically in the past week. Whatever they are planning is happening soon. Morrison made his decision with the same calculated thinking that apparently made aliens nervous. The Meridian would continue toward the signal source to gather more intelligence, even though it might mean walking into a trap. The information was too important for human survival to ignore. Set course for the strongest signal source, he ordered. Maximum speed, but maintain stealth protocols. We need to know what we are dealing with before they decide our fate for us. The ship changed direction and accelerated toward an uncertain future while its human crew prepared to face the consequences of 40 years of secret alien observation and judgment. 3 weeks after the Meridian discovered the alien signals, massive ships appeared at the edge of human space. The vessels were unlike anything humans had ever seen, with designs that seemed to bend light around their hulls. They positioned themselves at every major jump point leading to Earth and the outer colonies. Ambassador Vera Collins received the emergency call while she was having breakfast in her apartment on Luna Station. The Secretary General himself was on the line, telling her that first contact had finally happened, but not the way anyone had planned. She had 30 minutes to pack before transport to the alien flagship. They are demanding a representative from Earth government, the Secretary General explained over the comlink. They specifically requested someone with authority to speak for all of humanity. That means you, Vera. Collins had spent 20 years preparing for this moment through diplomatic training and xenopsychology studies. She had always imagined first contact would involve careful protocols and scientific exchange. Instead, she was being summoned to answer charges she did not understand. The alien ship that collected her was enormous beyond human understanding. The docking bay alone could have held 50 human cruisers. The corridor stretched in directions that hurt to look at, and gravity seemed to work differently in different sections of the ship. Her escort was a being that looked like a cross between a jellyfish and a crystal formation. It spoke through a translation device that made its words sound hollow and musical at the same time. You are Vera Collins, it stated. You will speak for the humans before the Galactic Council. Your species is being evaluated for continued existence. The words hit Collins like a physical blow. Continued existence meant humans were on trial for their lives. She forced herself to remain calm and diplomatic even though her heart was racing. May I ask what charges humanity faces? She said carefully. No charges, the being replied. Evaluation only. Your species possesses dangerous cognitive patterns that threaten galactic stability. The Council will determine appropriate containment measures. Collins was led to a vast chamber where 12 different alien species sat in a circle around a central platform. Each species looked completely different from the others, but all of them focused their attention on her with expressions she could not read. One of the beings stepped forward. It was tall and thin with skin that shifted colors like oil on water. When it spoke, the translation made its voice sound ancient and tired. I am High Arbiter Zethkara of the Zelathi Empire, it said. We have observed your species for many cycles and found disturbing patterns in human behavior. You will explain these patterns or face immediate containment. What patterns concern you? Collins asked. Your species demonstrates unprecedented cognitive duality, Zethkara replied. Humans can simultaneously experience strong emotional bonds and make completely detached logical calculations about life and death. This combination has never been observed in galactic history. Another being joined the conversation. This one looked like a walking tree made of metal and crystal. I am Speaker Vorth of the Korthic Confederation. We have studied your historical conflicts. Humans calculate acceptable casualties with mathematical precision while grieving for every loss. This psychological contradiction suggests dangerous instability. Collins began to understand what was happening. The aliens were not afraid of human technology or aggression. They were afraid of human psychology itself. The ability to love deeply while making harsh practical decisions apparently seemed impossible or insane to other species. These capabilities, you describe, make humans effective survivors, Collins said. We do not see them as contradictions but as necessary balance. Balance, repeated a third alien that looked like a living shadow with glowing eyes. I am Consensus Prime of the Vrex Collective. Our analysis indicates human decision-making processes are chaotic and unpredictable. Your species can choose genocide or sacrifice based on identical logical frameworks. This makes humans too dangerous for unrestricted galactic contact. The accusations continued for hours as each council member presented their evidence against humanity. They had studied every human conflict from ancient wars to recent colonial disputes. They knew about philosophical thought experiments like the trolley problem and how humans debated killing one person to save 5 others. Your species treats morality as mathematics, Zethkara said. You reduce sacred concepts of life and death to numerical calculations. No other galactic civilization has ever demonstrated such callous logical processing combined with emotional attachment. Collins realized she was fighting for the survival of her entire species. Every word she said could mean the difference between human freedom and human extinction. She thought about her response carefully, using the same kind of calculated thinking that made the aliens nervous. You observe our decision-making, but you do not understand our motivation, she said. Humans make difficult choices because we value life so highly that we will accept emotional pain to preserve as much life as possible. We calculate casualties to minimize them, not to ignore them. Impossible, said Speaker Vorth. Emotional beings cannot make such calculations. Logical beings do not experience emotional pain from their decisions. Your species claims to do both simultaneously, which violates known psychological models. Then perhaps your models are incomplete, Collins replied. Would you allow us to demonstrate human decision-making processes so you can observe them directly rather than relying on historical analysis? The council members communicated among themselves in languages and methods that hurt Collins' head. To witness, finally Zethkara spoke for the group. We will permit demonstration under controlled conditions, it said. You have 7 standard cycles to prove human psychology is not a threat to galactic stability. Failure will result in permanent containment of your species within current territorial boundaries. Collins felt relief mixed with terror. 7 days to prove humanity deserved to survive and expand into the galaxy. She thought about the billions of humans who did not know their fate was being decided by aliens who found human compassion and logic equally disturbing. We accept your terms, she said with the same calculated courage that had brought humanity this far. The council session ended and Collins was escorted to quarters, where she could plan humanity's defense while the galaxy watched and judged every human choice. Ambassador Collins spent the first day in her assigned quarters planning humanity's defense with her hastily assembled team. Colonel Ryan Davis had been transported from Earth along with Dr. Helen Murphy, a philosophy professor from Cambridge University. They had 6 days left to convince 12 alien civilizations that human psychology was not a galactic threat. We need to show them our decision-making process in action, Collins said as they reviewed their strategy. Historical examples make us look cold and calculating. They need to see the emotional cost we pay for logical choices. Colonel Davis studied the tactical situation on his portable display. The problem is, they think emotion and logic cannot coexist in decision-making. Their species apparently evolved along single tracks, either pure emotion or pure logic, but never both together. Dr. Murphy looked up from her notes about galactic psychology. That explains why they find us threatening. We represent something their models say is impossible. A species that can feel deeply while thinking clearly during crisis situations? So we prove we are not impossible, Collins said. We show them human decision-making in real time with full transparency. Let them monitor our brain activity, emotional responses, and logical processes simultaneously. The next morning, Collins presented their proposal to the Galactic Council. The aliens would be allowed to observe human authorities handling actual crisis situations, through real-time monitoring of brain scans, emotional readings, and communication records. High Arbiter Zethkara considered the proposal with obvious skepticism. You would allow complete observation of human decision makers during actual emergencies, complete transparency, Collins confirmed. Monitor our thoughts, emotions, and decisions as they happen. Judge us based on what we actually do, not what you think we might do. The Council agreed to the demonstration and immediately began setting up monitoring equipment at human government centers and military commands. Within hours, alien sensors were tracking human brain activity across Earth and the colonies. The test came sooner than anyone expected. Pirates attacked a supply convoy near the New Brisbane colony and took 87 civilians hostage. The attackers demanded food, medical supplies, and safe passage in exchange for releasing their prisoners. Governor Steve Martinez found himself under alien observation as he handled the crisis from the Colonial Command Center. Sensors monitored his brain activity, heart rate, and stress hormones while he reviewed options with his security chief. We have three choices, Martinez said to his staff while aliens watched every neural firing in his brain. Negotiate and hope they honor the deal. Storm their ship and risk hostage casualties. Or wait and hope they release prisoners voluntarily, the alien observers saw Martinez's emotional centers lighting up with genuine concern for every hostage, while his logic centers calculated probabilities and outcomes with mathematical precision. His brain activity showed he was feeling real pain about potential losses, while simultaneously analyzing which choice would save the most lives. Negotiation has a 15% historical success rate with this pirate group, the security chief reported. They usually kill hostages anyway to eliminate witnesses. Waiting gives them time to escape with prisoners for slave markets. Martinez closed his eyes and the aliens watched his emotional and logical brain centers work together in ways their species had never evolved. He was feeling the weight of 87 lives while calculating the mathematics of rescue operations. Military assault has a 73% success rate based on our tactical analysis, he continued. Estimated casualties are 12 hostages with 68% probability of total mission success. Dr. Murphy watched the alien reactions from the council chamber. They were clearly disturbed by Martinez's brain scans, which showed intense emotional activity occurring simultaneously with cold logical calculation. Order the assault, Martinez said quietly. Accept responsibility for estimated 12 casualties to prevent 87 deaths in slave markets. The aliens observed as Martinez gave the order while tears ran down his face. His brain showed he was experiencing genuine grief for lives not yet lost, while maintaining logical certainty that his choice would minimize total casualties. The rescue operation succeeded with only 8 hostage deaths instead of the predicted 12. Martinez immediately took personal responsibility for the losses and attended every funeral while the aliens watched his emotional responses. This is impossible, Consensus Prime of the Vrex Collective said during council deliberations. He experienced grief before the deaths occurred, then made logical decisions despite emotional pain, then felt more grief after the consequences. No species can function with such psychological contradiction. Collins stood before the council as they debated human psychology. What you call contradiction, we call balance. Governor Martinez felt the full weight of his decision because human emotions serve as a check against casual brutality. We cannot make these choices easily, which prevents us from making them unnecessarily. Speaker Vorth of the Korthek Confederation displayed brain scans from various galactic species. Our emotional species cannot make calculated decisions about life and death. Our logical species make such decisions without psychological cost. Humans somehow do both, which creates unpredictable behavior patterns. Predictable behavior, Dr. Murphy said. We always choose the option that saves the most lives while accepting emotional responsibility for necessary losses. Our psychology creates natural limits on utilitarian calculations because we feel the cost of every decision. The demonstration continued for 3 more days as human authorities handled various crises under alien observation. Each time the pattern repeated. Humans felt deep emotional pain while making logical choices that minimized casualties and maximized survival chances. They are not cold calculators, Zethkara admitted to the council. They experience full emotional cost for every decision, but this makes their choices more disturbing, not less. They choose to carry psychological pain in order to make optimal survival decisions. Collins realized the aliens were more frightened by human emotional strength than human logical ability. The capacity to feel suffering while choosing to cause less suffering apparently seemed like madness to species that had evolved simpler psychological frameworks. You fear us because we can bear the weight of necessary choices, she said. Your species either cannot make these decisions or cannot feel their cost. Humans can do both, which means we will survive situations that would destroy other civilizations. The council voted to extend deliberations for one more day while they processed everything they had observed about human psychology during the crisis demonstrations. On the final day of deliberations, the Galactic Council revealed information that changed everything. High Arbiter Zethkara activated a holographic display showing star charts that stretched back millions of years. The evaluation of humanity was designed by the architects, Zethkara announced. An ancient race that vanished from the galaxy long before our civilizations achieved spaceflight. They left behind protocols for testing emerging species based on psychological capabilities. We did not understand until now. Ambassador Collins felt her heart sink as she realized the implications. The entire first contact scenario had been an elaborate test designed by beings that no longer existed. Every council member, every demonstration, every moment of the past week had followed ancient programming. Captain Morrison and the crew of the Meridian were suddenly transported from their ship to a massive structure hidden inside a neutron star system. The facility was clearly artificial, but built with technology that made human science look like stone tools. Dr. Amy Brooks ran her scanners over the walls and corridors as they were escorted deeper into the facility. This place is older than Earth, she whispered to Morrison. The materials are not found anywhere in known space, and the energy readings are off our measurement scales. Welcome to the archive of evolutionary psychology, their escort said. It was a mechanical being that looked like a walking sculpture made of liquid metal. I am Keeper 7, assigned to administer the final phase of humanity's evaluation. The humans were brought to a vast chamber filled with displays showing the histories of thousands of different species. Each display tracked the psychological evolution of civilizations from primitive origins to galactic expansion or extinction. The architects studied the development of consciousness across the galaxy for millions of years, Keeper 7 explained. They discovered that all species evolve along predictable psychological paths that determine their ultimate survival potential. Morrison studied the displays while Brooks recorded everything with her scanners. Most species showed simple psychological development either toward pure emotional decision-making or pure logical decision-making, but never both together. Where are the architects now? Collins asked through the communication link. Extinct, Keeper 7 replied without emotion. They achieved perfect logical capabilities but lost the ability to make decisions that required emotional commitment. When their homeworld faced destruction, they could calculate optimal survival strategies, but could not emotionally commit to choices that involved sacrificing some of their population to save the rest. Dr. Brooks understood the implications immediately. They died because they could think but not feel their way through moral dilemmas. Correct, Keeper 7 said. The architects created these testing protocols to identify species that might succeed where they failed. Humanity is the first species to demonstrate the psychological duality the architects wished they possessed. Lieutenant Commander Paul Rivers was selected for the final test series. He was placed in the simulation chamber where he would face escalating moral dilemmas while alien sensors monitored his complete psychological responses. The first test was simple. Rivers had to choose between saving 5 injured humans or 1 injured alien. His brain activity showed him calculating survival probabilities while feeling genuine concern for all 6 individuals. He chose based on medical triage principles. To save the most lives possible while accepting emotional responsibility for the one death, the tests became more complex. Rivers faced choices between certain small losses and possible large losses, between saving friends and saving strangers, between human survival and alien survival. Each time his psychology showed the same pattern, feeling the full emotional weight of decisions while making choices based on mathematical optimization of survival outcomes. The final test broke Rivers emotionally while proving human capabilities beyond alien understanding. He was forced to choose between saving his own ship with 200 crew members or allowing it to be destroyed to prevent a chain reaction that would kill 50,000 aliens on a nearby planet. Lieutenant Kate Foster was brought in as Rivers became too emotionally compromised to continue. She reviewed the scenario with tears streaming down her face while her brain performed cold mathematical calculations about acceptable losses. 200 human lives versus 50,000 alien lives, she said quietly. The mathematics are clear. Even though the choice will destroy me emotionally, Foster authorized the destruction of her own ship while crying for her crewmates who would die. Her brain scans showed she was experiencing devastating grief while making the logically optimal choice to minimize total casualties. The alien observers were silent as they watched Foster carry the weight of 200 deaths she had chosen to cause in order to prevent 50,000 deaths she could have prevented. Her willingness to sacrifice herself and her friends, based on pure utilitarian mathematics while feeling the full emotional cost of the decision, represented exactly what the architects had theorized but never achieved. Impossible consensus prime. Whispered. She chose based on optimal mathematics while experiencing maximum emotional trauma. This combination of capabilities should result in psychological breakdown. Instead, Foster composed herself and began planning how to minimize the emotional impact on surviving crew families. Her brain activity showed her channeling grief into constructive action while maintaining logical clarity about future decisions. Keeper 7 deactivated the simulation and Foster learned that her crew was actually safe. The test had been a complete simulation, but her psychological responses were completely real. She had chosen to sacrifice everything she cared about based on mathematical principles while feeling the full cost of her decision. Humanity passes all evaluation criteria, Keeper 7 announced. Your species possesses the psychological capabilities the architects required for optimal civilization survival. You can make necessary utilitarian decisions while maintaining emotional connections that prevent casual brutality. The testing facility began displaying human psychological profiles alongside those of the extinct architects. The similarities were obvious, but humans had evolved the emotional resilience that the architects lacked. The architects could calculate optimal survival strategies, but could not commit to choices that caused suffering, Brooks said as she studied the data. Humans can commit to those choices because we accept emotional suffering as the price of logical decision, making Morrison realize that humanity had passed a test designed by a dead civilization that had failed the same test themselves. The irony was overwhelming, but the implications were clear. Humans possessed psychological capabilities that were theoretically optimal but practically rare in galactic evolution. The Galactic Council reconvened with new understanding of what they had observed in human psychology. Dr. Helen Murphy was brought before them to explain the philosophical implications of the test results while alien scientists struggled to understand how human consciousness actually worked. Your calculations are not cold, Speaker Vorth said with obvious confusion. Our analysis of human brain activity shows that emotional centers remain fully active during logical decision-making. How do you function with such psychological conflict? Murphy had spent her career studying human moral philosophy and was prepared for this question. The conflict is not a bug in human psychology, it is a feature. Emotional pain serves as a natural check against making utilitarian calculations casually or unnecessarily high. Arbiter Zethkara displayed brain scans from the recent tests showing human neural activity during moral decision-making. These readings suggest humans experience grief and regret as functional parts of their decision process, not as unwanted side effects. Exactly, Murphy replied. Humans evolved to feel the cost of our choices because psychological pain prevents us from making harsh decisions unless they are truly necessary for survival. The emotional weight ensures we only use utilitarian calculations when all other options have been exhausted. Consensus prime of the Vrex. Collective struggled with concepts that seemed impossible according to their understanding of consciousness. Our logical species make optimal decisions without emotional interference. Your species claims that emotional interference improves logical decision-making, not interference, Murphy corrected. Integration. Human emotions provide essential data about the moral weight of decisions, while logic provides frameworks for minimizing harm. Neither system works optimally without the other. The revelation that shocked the galaxy was not that humans could make cold calculations, but that their calculations were actually warm. Every utilitarian decision carried full emotional weight, which made humans reluctant to use such thinking except in genuine emergencies. Dr. Amy Brooks presented her analysis of comparative galactic psychology to the Council. Other species either make decisions without emotional cost or cannot make harsh decisions because of emotional paralysis. Humans uniquely evolved to carry emotional burdens, while still making mathematically optimal choices. The aliens learned that human guilt and regret were not weaknesses but sophisticated, psychological tools that prevented the abuse of utilitarian thinking. Because humans felt genuine pain from difficult decisions, they could not make such choices lightly or frequently. Commander Angela Price discovered archived records in the Architect facility that explained why this psychological combination was so rare. Most species that developed strong emotional bonds could not make calculated decisions about life and death. Most species that developed logical calculation abilities lost emotional connections that provided moral guidance. The architects faced extinction because they could calculate the optimal solution to save their species but could not emotionally commit to actions that required sacrificing some of their population, Price reported to the Council. They died from decision paralysis. The Council members began to understand that they faced similar limitations in their own psychology. The emotional species could not make necessary harsh choices during genuine emergencies. The logical species could make such choices, but without emotional cost they risked becoming casually brutal. Humans represent the solution to a fundamental problem in consciousness evolution, Zethkara admitted. You can make optimal survival decisions while maintaining psychological connections that prevent moral deterioration. Lieutenant Kate Foster was brought before the Council to explain her thought process during the final test. The aliens were particularly interested in how she maintained logical clarity while experiencing devastating emotional pain. I felt like I was murdering my friends, Foster said honestly. But I also knew that letting 50,000 aliens die to save 200 humans would be morally wrong according to every ethical framework I understand. The math was clear, even though it hurt. How do you function after making such choices? Asked a Council member whose species had never faced comparable moral dilemmas. We carry the weight, Foster replied. Human psychology allows us to accept guilt and regret as prices we pay for making necessary decisions. We do not try to eliminate emotional pain, we try to channel it into better future choices. The Council learned that human decision-makers often suffered long-term psychological consequences from utilitarian choices, but accepted these costs as part of their responsibility. This willingness to carry emotional burdens indefinitely ensured that harsh decisions were never made casually. Dr. Murphy explained the philosophical implications that had terrified other species. Humans develop moral systems that require both emotional engagement and logical calculation. We believe that optimal ethics demands feeling the full weight of our choices while making them based on mathematical optimization of outcomes. The aliens realized that their fear of human psychology was actually recognition of human moral superiority, while other species were limited by either emotional paralysis or logical callousness. Humans had evolved beyond these constraints. Your species possesses the psychological traits necessary for optimal civilization management. Keeper 7 announced from the Architect facility. Humans can make decisions that other species cannot make while maintaining moral standards that other species cannot sustain. The revelation spread through galactic civilization as alien psychologists struggled to understand how human consciousness worked. Some species began attempting to modify their own psychology to achieve human emotional and logical integration. Ambassador Collins realized that humanity was not on trial for being dangerous but for being psychologically advanced beyond current galactic understanding. Their combination of emotional depth and logical capability represented the next stage of consciousness evolution. "We are not perfect," Collins said to the Council. "Human decision-makers suffer psychological damage from utilitarian choices and sometimes make mistakes under pressure. But we can make necessary decisions that preserve life while feeling appropriate guilt when those decisions cause harm." The Council faced their own utilitarian calculation about humanity's future role in galactic civilization, while human psychology provided a template for how such decisions should be made with full emotional engagement and mathematical optimization. The Galactic Council deliberated for 3 days while humanity waited to learn their fate. Ambassador Collins spent the time preparing for either integration into galactic civilization or permanent isolation from the rest of the galaxy. The decision would affect every human alive and every human yet to be born. High Arbiter Zethkara finally called the session to order with all 12 Council species present. The chamber was filled with tension as representatives from across the galaxy prepared to vote on humanity's future. "The Council has reached a decision regarding the human species," Zethkara announced. "By a margin of 7 votes to 5, humanity will be granted full membership in galactic civilization with special status and responsibilities." Collins felt relief flood through her body, but she noticed the narrow margin of victory. Nearly half. The galaxy still considered humans too dangerous for unrestricted contact despite everything they had demonstrated. "What special status and responsibilities?" Collins asked carefully. Speaker Vorth stepped forward to explain the terms. "Humans will serve as ethical consultants for civilization-level decisions requiring utilitarian calculations. When galactic society faces choices between competing goods or necessary evils, human advisors will be called upon to make decisions other species cannot make." The implications were staggering. Humanity would not just join galactic civilization, they would become its moral decision-makers for the hardest choices. Other species would provide wisdom, technology, and perspective. But when someone needed to carry the weight of impossible decisions, they would turn to humans. Captain Morrison was promoted to Admiral and tasked with forming the Human Ethical Response Corps. The organization would train humans to help alien civilizations navigate moral dilemmas that have been paralyzed for decades or centuries, because no species could make the necessary hard choices. There are currently 47 galactic crises that have persisted because no Council species can make the required utilitarian calculations, Morrison learned during his briefing. These problems range from resource allocation disputes to planetary evacuation priorities to terraforming decisions that affect multiple ecosystems. Dr. Amy Brooks discovered that several wars had been fought for hundreds of years because neither side could make peace terms that required accepting partial losses. Human negotiators would be able to calculate optimal compromise solutions while feeling appropriate regret for necessary sacrifices. The first test of human ethical consultation came within weeks. The Zelathi Empire faced a plague that threatened their homeworld, but the cure required harvesting organs from a closely related species that would become extinct in the process. Both species had been debating the choice for 50 years while the plague spread. Dr. Helen Murphy was assigned to evaluate the situation with full access to medical data, population projections, and cultural impact assessments. She spent days calculating survival probabilities while feeling genuine anguish about the moral implications. "The mathematics are clear," Murphy reported to the Zelathi leadership. "Harvesting the organs will save 4 billion lives at the cost of completely destroying a species of 2 million individuals." However, there is a 30% chance of developing synthetic alternatives within 10 years if Zealothi population centers are evacuated and resources redirected to research. The Zealothi had been unable to choose between certain extinction of their allies and possible extinction of their own species. Murphy recommended the evacuation and research option, while accepting responsibility if the gamble failed and billions died from the plague. "I may be sentencing your entire civilization to death," Murphy said with tears in her eyes. "But I believe the chance of saving both species is worth accepting that risk, and I will carry the guilt if my decision proves wrong." The Zealothi leaders were amazed that Murphy could make such a decision while feeling the full emotional weight of potential consequences. Their own psychology made them incapable of choosing between certain harm to allies and possible harm to themselves. Human ethical consultants began solving problems across the galaxy that had been deadlocked for generations. Colonial disputes were resolved through calculated compromises that minimized casualties while accepting that some groups would suffer losses. Resource allocation was optimized to save the most lives even when it meant some communities received less than they needed. Admiral Morrison established training protocols for human consultants that emphasized both mathematical analysis and emotional resilience. Humans who served in these roles needed to make optimal decisions while carrying psychological burdens that would destroy individuals from other species. "We are not becoming the galaxy's rulers," Morrison explained to Earth government officials. "We are becoming its servants. Every difficult choice that other species cannot make will fall to humans who must feel the full cost of every decision." Lieutenant Kate Foster became one of the most respected ethical consultants after her performance in the architect tests. She specialized in military conflicts where calculated decisions about acceptable casualties could end wars that might otherwise drag on for decades. Foster's first assignment involved a border dispute between two species that had been fighting for 40 years. Neither side could accept peace terms that admitted fault or accepted territorial losses. Foster calculated an optimal compromise that minimized future conflict potential while requiring both sides to acknowledge responsibility for war crimes. This solution will save approximately 50,000 lives per year going forward, Foster reported to the warring factions. "But it requires both of your species to accept guilt for actions that you believe were justified. I understand this causes psychological harm, but the mathematics clearly show this approach prevents the most future suffering." Both species agreed to Foster's terms partly because they could see that the decision caused her genuine emotional pain. Her willingness to carry the psychological weight of forcing them to accept guilt made her recommendations more acceptable than purely logical analysis. Ambassador Collins found herself managing Earth's transition from isolated species to galactic ethical consultants. The responsibility was overwhelming, but she understood that humanity had evolved for exactly this purpose. "We discovered that our greatest strength is not our technology or our military capability," Collins addressed the United Earth Assembly. "Our greatest strength is our willingness to feel emotional pain in order to make optimal logical decisions. This makes us uniquely qualified to help the galaxy solve problems that have no easy solutions." The Galactic Ethics Academy was established on Earth, where young humans learned to balance emotional intelligence with utilitarian calculation. Students studied philosophy, mathematics, psychology, and practical decision making while preparing for careers that would require them to carry moral burdens for multiple species. Years later, Admiral Morrison reflected on humanity's role in galactic civilization while reviewing reports from human consultants across known space. Humans had become the species that other civilizations turned to when faced with impossible choices, knowing that human advisors would find optimal solutions, while feeling appropriate guilt for necessary costs. "We are the galaxy's conscience and calculator combined," Morrison wrote in his final report. "Other species provide wisdom, perspective, and technological advancement. But when someone must carry the emotional weight of logical decisions, they call humans who learn to feel everything while choosing based on mathematics the galaxy had found its moral decision makers in the species." that could love deeply while calculating coldly all, while accepting the psychological price of utilitarian choices that preserve the most life possible.